Happy Thanksgiving, everybody out there. It's the Resistance broadcast, and we are here on Thanksgiving morning because we love you so much, and we want to still do the podcast, even though it's Thanksgiving. It's bright outside. I smell cooking going on upstairs. James, I don't know about you, but Thanksgiving's always a great day. It's always a fun day, and it's always a day where we eat a lot of food. I imagine it's what it's like being Jabba the Hutt, but not being a jerk. What do you think?
That does make sense. I feel like it's a lot of waiting. Like, it's like, man, I can smell and I'm hungry, but I don't want to eat, but I also want a snack because people put out snacks.
But not too much.
But I definitely enjoy like being with family and hanging out with family. It's never like a bad thing for me, you know? So all of the people that we end up getting together with and doing like Thanksgiving is always fun for me. I like seeing them and hanging out and talking and everything like that. Yeah. Do you happen to do any sort of Friendsgiving? Do you have a group of friends?
It's funny you say that because for a while we did do that and then it stopped. A few people moved away. One of the people who hosted it moved away and that sort of broke it up a bit. But we're doing it again this year. Similar group of friends, a couple different, but we are going to be doing that. But we all decided we're going to do an Italian-based Friendsgiving because we don't want to redo the whole.
You're going to murder people?
Exactly. That's exactly it. But no, we're going to do Italian food and Italian desserts, appetizers, all that stuff as our Friendsgiving because I was like, I don't want to do a whole another round of Thanksgiving food 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. So the theme's there, the vibe is there, but we're doing a different type of food for that. But traditional Thanksgiving at my parents' house, we're going to later today. So what about you? You do Friendsgiving?
I do not. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea is fun. I just, no one has ever organized anything like that. And most of the time too, I find that, we all have like multiple Thanksgivings we're going to do. Like you are doing it right by choosing a different, theme.
Yeah.
But I think like, we're already like doing, this family and this family and this family.
It's a lot. Yeah. Speaking of families, the Star Wars family has gone through some changes of late. Mostly good, it appears, but we'll get our opinions on that in just a moment. But we do want to say happy Thanksgiving to our co-host, Lacey Gilleran, who is home with the family, taking some time away from the pod.
Baby's first Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Arch, his first Thanksgiving. Very cool. So hope all is well with Lacey. And to everybody else out there, of course, anyone listening, watching, if you're listening to us on Thanksgiving morning, very cool, whether you're on your way to someone's house or you're getting ready and you're in the kitchen and TRB's on. Either way, thank you very much for taking on this episode because we got a good one, James. We got some really cool news we're going to get into in just a moment. And then also the back half of the episode, we're going to do a draft, but more of in the fun spirit, not as competitive, but we're going to draft the reasons why we're thankful for Star Wars. Now, last year or year before, we did why we're thankful for Star Wars, but it was like everything. George Lucas, all that stuff. This is what Star Wars has given us. So, Star Wars and beyond and after. But it's going to be a good time doing that as well. So let's fire this thing up right now. We got the Resistance Report. It's hotter than it's ever been. Maybe not ever been. But it's hotter than it's been in a long time. So let's get after it.
All right.
It's the Resistance.
All right. This week... you might have seen it even earlier this week. All of this news is very, very topical, very current. But this particular story has to do with Daisy Ridley and her interview with Collider, where she was talking about being at Celebration, walking out on stage, and in knowing what a little bit, because she says, I really do not know much about it, but she knows a little bit about the future upcoming movie. And she said... a full sentence, but the headlines were half of that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
The big headline is that the Star Wars movie that she's going to be in is not what she expected. She says, not what I expected. However, you look a little bit closer at the quote, that sentence finishes with, it's not what I expected, but I'm very excited. Right. So, I think in the days of Rian Johnson and even Taika Waititi's recent comments, all this stuff about like what people want out of Star Wars, for somebody to come along and say it's not what I expected, period, is a little bit of a different story than it's not what I expected, but I'm very excited to do it. Is a little bit of a different comment.
When we first talked about this, when the news first dropped, you seemed a little worried.
Yeah.
So do you want to start with that, or?
Well, I think that based on what she says, it's not what I expected, but I'm very excited. It's still a little worrisome to me because I think that she was a part of these 3 movies and she has an idea in her head of where that would go. Now, she is different from fans, but she, not being the writer, right, or not being, who's producing that piece of content that she's going to star in, she is sort of like a fan. She experienced the first 3 and then now there's another one coming. And if we are on the same page, her and us, then it is not what we think logically makes sense. Does that kind of make sense, what I'm saying? Like if she's saying it's not what I expected, it still can be good, but I'm like, what did you expect? Because I bet what you expect is what we're thinking would be the case too. But I could be wrong on that. She could be way off. She had this idea that she was going to blank and do this thing, or whatever. And it's like, no, that doesn't even, that wouldn't even work. The logical next step for all fans, we all see it coming, except for you, Daisy, is this other thing. I still think there's a lot to be said about the fact that she says, I saw it and it's not what I expected, but I am very excited. Mm-hmm. So where are you with that, with her statements?
I actually am okay with that, because I don't think she probably felt the same way about something like The Last Jedi, and we know Mark Hamill certainly felt that way. And I mean, that might make people nervous too. But when I think about it, everything I've been hearing about this new Rey movie and how she's rebuilding the Jedi Order, and then what people are talking about, what they want to see in it, none of it really, I'll be honest, excited me. I was like, this feels very like low-hanging fruit, like the most common story you can come up with is, okay, so Rey's a Jedi now, so what are we going to do? Oh, I know, we'll have her rebuild the Jedi Order. It's like, so when I hear her say it's not what I expected, that actually gets me a little excited. It gets me wondering, like, because really it's untapped timeline for Star Wars. They can do anything they want to do with this. So I pair that excitement of, oh, well, if she didn't expect it, we have the foundation of legacy here, because I do think this movie will still have Chewie, Falcon, C-3PO, R2-D2, BB-8, stuff we're familiar with, which will help get the general audiences in, still feel familiar, and then maybe do something weird. It doesn't necessarily mean that to take the character and twist her up and change her. It could be unexpected in terms of where she goes or a situation she's put in, not necessarily like, all of a sudden Rey's going to be this totally different character. So I don't think that's, I think they have Rey established as a brand, what kids are going to be expecting to see when they go to see this first movie. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to get that Rey. I don't think that's going to be the problem. So I'm not concerned there. So I'm not worried about that. Actually, that made me more excited to hear that it's not what she expected. Now, she hasn't read a script yet. So she read an outline, a paragraph of what they think they're going to be doing. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be more to it once she gets to read the script and all that. I found
remember
what she was saying.
Do you remember all this about her being like at a party and JJ like, or Ryan or something? I can't remember the details. Somebody like tells her what's going to happen. And she was like so excited about it. And then like none of that even happened because it wasn't even that director or writer or something. Do you remember this?
I don't remember that. I mean, I vaguely remember that, but I don't remember enough of the details to compare.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off to go on a short little tangent, but I was like, I just sometimes when it's this, like it's not what I expected, but I'm excited. I'm like, but we don't even know that this is the thing. You know, there could be so many changes, so many different things that happen along the way.
Yeah, I think if it's a gist of where they're going with the story, so it seems to me she didn't read a script, she just got an idea of the story. Which to me seems like it's a very general synopsis. So
yeah, it's like an elevator pitch just to like throw it your way.
So whatever she wasn't expecting is something very broad and general. So the whole thing is probably something she didn't have in her mind, which to me, again, excites me because everything she probably heard is what we heard, which is rebuilding the Jedi Order, whatever Kathleen Kennedy said
possibly
9 months ago. So the unexpected thing helps me as someone who felt that sounded bland. Now, what the other part I find very interesting is she says she knows the storyline for one film, and she says that's not to say that that's all it's going to be, but that's all I know about. But she also said she thinks this will be the next film, which is currently still slotted at May 2026. I think they could still meet that timeline because I think the script is probably done by Stephen Knight, right? That's the guy.
Correct.
Yeah.
On that,
and
movie.
then the other funny part is, I know people were saying they think she's been in the loop for a while, but I believe her when she says that she wasn't in the loop until very close to Celebration, and I think that's an idea that sort of got put together rather quickly for her. Because she said she told Steven Weintraub from Collider that when she saw him at Sundance, she didn't know that she was coming back, and that was January 19th to the 29th, and Celebration was less than 3 months after that. So I think a lot of that moved rather quickly, and probably some of that had to do with the pressure from Disney saying, like, you guys got to make some movies. And they're like, all right, let's bring her back in. So overall, I like this. There's not a ton here in terms of like us really grasping what this movie's going to be, but I like the fact that there's going to be something in there that maybe we aren't expecting if she's not expecting it. And I also like the fact that she's saying like she thinks it's going to be the next movie. So all these things seem positive to me. And I can't help but feel like this movie is definitely going to happen.
Yeah, I second that for sure. And, I don't know, is there an audio version of this that you came across? Like, is there video audio where you can hear her say these lines? I don't believe so.
I don't
because
think so either.
I recently rewatched that Key and Peele sketch. Do you know where one is texting the other? And
Are you
like
serious?
really
I saw that recently too. Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been just passed around. But yeah, he's like, I don't care, man, whatever. And the guy's like, I don't care, whatever. Like, like it's just this thing. And I thought of that when I read the article or when I read the comments too, because I was like, there's a big difference between saying like, it's not what I expected, but I'm excited, and something different where you're like, it's totally not what I expected, but I am so excited. It's like, there's just a different vibe. And I would like to hear how it was said too. But
if that quote was just in a vacuum on its own, I'd be like, I see what you're saying there. But she peppers it with other positive things, like the story is really cool,
Right. Yeah. That to me, like, sort of like what you're saying, it's sort of on its own. It sounds like a Mark Hamill Last Jedi quote. Like, it is not what I expected, but I'm excited for the movie to come out, and it's like, okay, maybe not. But I think you're right that she peppers all the stuff around it, and sets it up as a generally positive thing. But like I said right at the very beginning, I think what you're going to see in the headlines is it's not what I expected. And you're going to get a lot of people clicking on those articles to see why. Whoa, what? How are they messing up this whole thing again?
Oh, I don't want to get too far on this tangent here, but I'm so beyond the point of like how things are getting twisted on social media, and they find themselves into blog articles, and it's just not even true. It's just so tough to go through all that, and it's happening right now with the new Scream movie and what's going on with all that chaos. But back to this, the only other thing that if you don't think this is odd, let me know. But the only other thing I found a little strange is she mentions Kathleen Kennedy, but she doesn't once mention the director or the writer, whereas she would mention JJ's name and even Ryan's name quite a bit when talking about the development of this stuff. So I just found it a little uncharacteristic that she doesn't mention the director once in this situation. Not so much the writer, because I don't remember her ever saying like, well, Lawrence Kasdan said this, or, but she would always say, JJ, we're working with blah, blah, blah. But she doesn't make one mention of Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy here. I'm not saying she's out by any means, but I just found that interesting.
Yeah, she doesn't specify who told her this information either. So I don't know if it was Kathy or Charmaine, or Steven or anybody else, you know what I mean? That is just like, oh, we're so glad to have you on board. You know what's going on, right? And yeah, Josh Gad, that's a good one. Like, you know what's going on. She's like, no, tell me, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you're going to be doing this or whatever. And she's like, oh, that's cool.
I've never thought about it like that before.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that before is exactly right. Well, we would like to probably move on to our next story here, because there was a big article that came out about Dave Filoni getting a new title and a new position at Lucasfilm, specifically Chief Creative Officer. And, initially it was Variety that did the report, or you can read mostly about it there. But it's interesting because it seems like a move that fans like. We like Dave Filoni. We like to see him be put in that position. And some people have floated the idea of taking over Kathleen Kennedy's position, but us here on the Resistance broadcast say that's not the position that needs to happen. It needs to be something more like this. And Chief Creative Officer, I don't know how this stuff works out. I don't know if there was a Chief Creative Officer before this. It's kind of one of those things where like they just sort of make up names, and he even acknowledges that in the article. He says they're calling me Chief Creative Officer. He doesn't like buy into the like, hey, I made General Manager, woohoo, He's just like, I just do my thing. And they call it something different now. But what's cool about it is it allows me to get into these projects far before I ever got to see them before. I'm now at the beginning of every project, working its way through. And I can now, after so many years of working in multiple forms of Star Wars, I'm able to give them a little bit more information on what we want to accomplish, more than just the basic lore and concepts and mythos of Star Wars. So I think overall, like this is not a bad move, and this is good, and it kind of proves that Filoni's sticking around for a long time. So what are your thoughts on the new CCO at Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni?
Yeah, and before Filoni, Carrie Beck too also promoted to essentially be the replacement for Michelle Rejwan. Mm-hmm. Because her title on the website says VP of Live Action Development and Production, which I think was exactly what Michelle Rejwan's title was at the time. And that's interesting because she, to this point, hadn't worked on any of the movies, and her first foray into live action producing was, I believe, Book of Boba Fett. So a lot of faith in Carrie Beck, who has been there a long time, but I think that's good. You know, she's young. It looks like they're setting up the building blocks for the future generation or decades of Lucasfilm. And then, yeah, Filoni, bigger title. He's now second or third on the executive order of command, it appears. And yeah, it is a promotion. I think he is underplaying the importance he's going to have, in a sense. I think he is going to be sort of a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of guy, from the story and narrative point of view. And I could totally see him, you know, working with the conception ideas on these things as filmmakers are brought in. And, you know, Carrie Beck's going to be the one in charge of bringing in filmmakers to work on these Star Wars movies. But I liked his quote about saying, you know, to truly help the filmmakers, it's important for me to experience it firsthand. I can also lend a perspective on the challenges that telling these stories present. I feel more capable of being able to help outside of just saying Jedi are like this and Sith are like this, which is essentially what, like, I think Pablo Hidalgo does, more so, like making sure the story makes sense with the lore, like you were saying. Now he's a bigger picture in terms of we are developing stories and major motion pictures, and we need to make sure that works for that medium. And so it's more responsibility, without a doubt, for him.
Honestly, when you brought up Pablo Hidalgo, my understanding of what his position is, and we don't know, by the way, so this is your understanding, my understanding, just guesses, basically. My thought is that he's a little bit more about the continuity, and just to simply say, like, it's a Wednesday, so they would be wearing pink. Well, and it's not so much about like the way people act or their personalities or any sort of like bigger decisions on the way the franchise should go, anything along those lines. It's just literally like that line doesn't make sense, or they wouldn't go to that planet. They would go to this planet. You know what I mean?
Perhaps. I mean, his job title on the live action shows is like lore consultant.
I think that's what that is.
Yeah. Well,
that's how I take that.
And I think that fits in with the quote Filoni was saying, like, I don't just do this, you know, but this is a big deal because he is going to have an immense amount of power. It's definitely good from the optics perspective of, yes, he was the understudy for George Lucas. And he takes that responsibility very seriously, and he's very outward about that and candid about that. So I think that is a very good thing. But time will tell on how great this works. But a surface level, without knowing exactly how things are going to roll, it seems like a great PR move. It seems like a good move just from a logistic perspective, as opposed to just bringing in an outsider. So it just seems to make sense. It just maybe happened a bit quicker than I thought it was going to happen. Because we had done an episode in August or September about, is Dave Filoni going to be the heir to the Lucasfilm empire? And the title was tongue in cheek, but we did sort of say, I believe, that like we can see there being a new executive and him being a head of creative, and now he is.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, okay, I look at this list of people on their leadership page, and I'm like, I know 4 people, maybe. You know, like it's probably a little bit more, like maybe
Robert Doe, John Knoll, Doug Chang.
Yeah, but like you look at that list and like Doug Chang's like on the 3rd row down. Right. John Knoll's like on the 8th row down, you know, and it's like you're looking at this list of people, and like Lin-Wen Brennan, literally like side by side next to Kathleen Kennedy. She is the executive vice president and general manager of Lucasfilm. Where is she? What is she doing? What's going on? How does that person exist? And we know more from like people below her, specifically Dave Filoni. And I understand because he's the director and we've like kind of worked up with him because he's been more in the public light. A lot of these people are behind the scenes, but it really, like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, All right, John Knoll, executive creative director. Okay, Dave Filoni, executive vice president, chief creative officer. Like, I wouldn't even be able to tell you like if one's higher or lower. I assume they're higher because they're closer to the top. But it's like some of these names, like director versus officer, I'm like, I don't know. Like,
Well,
is that my not understanding how that stuff works just in public? Or is this another one of those things where, like, what was it? Elon a couple years ago, he's like, all these titles are just made up. Like, people do their jobs, but they just make up titles so that people can get paid less or more.
yeah, and I think there's branches to it. Like, obviously, John Knoll's involvement is heavily with ILM and the visual effects, and the same with Rob Bordeaux, who is essentially the Dave Filoni of ILM now. Or I should say Dave Filoni is the Rob Bordeaux of Lucasfilm now, because Rob Bordeaux's title is Chief Creative Officer for ILM, as well as being a senior VP. I mean, there's a ton of people on this executive board. I just think that's how things roll these days.
That's what I'm saying. I see senior vice president from like 20 of them.
But all you need to know is you scroll to the top of the page and Filoni's up there now. So
he's been up there, hasn't he?
But now he's the second in command under Kathleen Kennedy, and he's at the head of the creative decisions overall. So it's a big deal, man. It's going to be his show, and Kathleen Kennedy is going to lean heavily on him, and he's going to have an immense amount of influence on all of that. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I think he will have a good he obviously has a good working relationship with Carrie Beck, with Rebels. They've been together for over 10 years now. I think they will coexist in a very good way of knowing the right directors and writers to bring in for the future movies. And that's my focus, is the movies, because everything else like feeds and lives and breathes off of the value and success of the movies from a creative standpoint, and also, of course, a financial standpoint. So if they get lined up and get the right people in to write and make these movies, the shows will be able to essentially make themselves. Not literally, but you'll be able to farm pretty cool ideas from that for Disney Plus. So my focus is all on the movies, and I think with those two working so well together in the past, and Filoni knowing, just having he has the intangibles, I guess. He knows Star Wars in a way that can't be quantified. And I think him having his finger on the pulse of knowing which person to pull the trigger on to bring in, and which person not to bring in coinciding with Carrie Beck, I think is something they've needed for a long time. Because we've talked about in the podcast, it seems like what they had been doing was ear to the ground on social media. Who's popular now? Who's hot right now? Let's bring him in. Taika Waititi, Patty Jenkins. We go down the list. We've had that. We've had that point made for a very long time. I think that is something they've solely needed, and I think the two of them together will be able to maybe at least alleviate a lot of the problems they've had with the revolving door of people coming in and out.
Yep. I still stand a little bit. I'd like to know more about some of these positions at Lucasfilm. It confuses me sometimes. Like, obviously we've talked heads or tails over the story group, which probably doesn't even exist anymore.
No,
but
I don't think that exists anymore.
But it's one of these things where, like, I just wish I kind of had a better understanding of what these positions do. And if anybody knows, like, hey, hit me up and kind of explain some of those things. But it's just like, I want to hear that Dave Filoni's at the top and he can tell people what to do. But in his statement, he's like, I'm not telling people what to do. And I'm like, okay. So it's like, I'm just trying to understand it, because it feels like you're now in the position to be able to tell people how to do it, but he follows that up by saying, but I do feel like I'm trying to help them tell the best story. So he's just being polite about where his position, I think. But
yeah, like if James Mangold rolls in to make his movie, Dave Filoni's not going to be like, no, you can't do that scene there. You can't film that scene or whatever. Like, that's not going to happen. And James Mangold's going to be able to make the movie he wants to make. Maybe when it comes down to
who is saying that,
who's saying what,
who's saying no to James Mangold.
Oh,
Because
Kathleen
that's
Kennedy.
definitely been going on for a long time.
Kathleen Kennedy. We know for a fact that she made decisions down to like music decisions for TV shows.
Yeah.
So, and that's, that's the producer in her, I guess, that's there and that works. But I think Filoni's just going to be there to help them push the right buttons, make the right decisions on what stories they are telling and how they're telling them. And I really think it's a good thing, and I hope it is. I hope it turns out to be.
Well, let's move on to the Vanity Fair article, because the Vanity Fair article not only talks a little bit about that and Dave Filoni's new position, but it also covers a lot of the stuff that we were not able to get during the writer's strike and everything else.
Yeah, right.
So it's a lot of information about the Ahsoka television series. It was like, what was it like for Dave and these actors? What was the point of bringing these characters back? What was the motivation? What is it like having moved up from animated shows into live action? It was lots and lots of details that were all really cool. Quotes from Rosario, quotes from Hayden, like very fun read. Definitely go check it out. What do you think was a standout for you in this article?
I have a few takeaways for sure. I don't want to list them all because I don't want to take anything that you had in mind. So I'll just start with one.
I've got 3.
Yeah, I have 3. One is that obviously the future of Baylan's skull.
Yep.
His quote about it saying, obviously there's a story there. We're in a wait and see pattern at this point. So to me, that means if we get a green light on Ahsoka 2, then we have to do the unfortunate thing of recasting him. That's what that says to me. So I think if there is an Ahsoka 2, they carry on with this, we will have someone else playing Baylan Skull. I think if you read through between the lines on that, I think that's what that means. And then I loved what he said about the Anakin thing, because that was, I think, the thing from Ahsoka that people were speculating the most on is like, what was Anakin really there? Was it really him? Was it a vision of hers? Was it this? And I love how simplistically he put it. He's like, this is how I always saw Force Ghosts. They're there as like
consciousness. What did he say?
He said they are there as No, he said, I debate Force Ghosts with people all the time. To me, and this is his quote, to me, what they are mainly is inspiration. You have people in your life that I'm sure have inspired you, and you feel that all the time. You feel that when you need it. So essentially what he's saying is, it was Anakin. He was there, and he was there to help Ahsoka find her path without necessarily handing it to her. And I love that, because then we speculated on, like, because he was showing the dark and the light and stuff like that. It was all a way of Anakin helping Ahsoka find her true path and coming to terms with Anakin's past. But then he brought up the end too, which I liked a lot. And he said, of course, he's there with her. He's always been there with her, but she couldn't see it. She couldn't feel it. She didn't know. And she had isolated herself and made herself alone because she was afraid. And I sort of like that he's saying he's proud of her at the end. So that whole thing about, Anakin popping up at the end was very much in the spirit of Return of the Jedi, when Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin show up, sort of like to let Luke know, like, you can rest easy now. You did the right thing. Everything's all good. And that was Anakin's moment with Ahsoka there. So that answers a lot of questions. It probably isn't like the sexiest answer where people are looking for more like crazy twist turns and nuance, but I like that it's simple, because I don't think Force Ghosts should be much more than that. And I also like the fact that he's like, George already told Anakin's story. We're not here to expand upon that beyond Return of the Jedi. This is just stuff of Anakin being there as an inspiration for his
how he relates to Ahsoka.
Right. It's not like, there's more to Anakin's story. Now we're going to go watch this stuff to find out what else happens with him. No, he's just there as an inspiration, like Filoni said. So I loved all that. What?
Yeah.
How about some of your takeaways?
Well, I'll say this, like Filoni does a really good job. He's done it so many times over the years. He like takes elements that we already understand. You know, we know pen, right? We understand paper, right? But sometimes he just says a phrase and he's like, yeah, you take the pen and you use it to write on the paper. And it's like, I already knew both of those things, but the way you worded it makes me re-understand the whole situation very well.
Or just the affirmation of like, that's all. So it's just that linear. Cool. Like, awesome. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love all of his quotes about that stuff. There was one particular Hayden quote that was like my big takeaway from the whole thing. I should have been pulling it up as I was sitting here, but yeah, it was this quote from Hayden here that was like the thing that stuck out to me. I reread it and it didn't, but it, you know, sort of figuratively gave me the chills. But it was this understanding of Hayden's approach to the character this time around, which was, he says, there's a lot to unpack here. I was getting to play a version of the character that I hadn't before, and that was the all-knowing, all-powerful Jedi Master who could wield both sides of the Force. And similar, light and dark. So similar to what I was saying with Filoni, like, yeah, I know that, but like the way Hayden is spelling it out here of like, yeah, that was our approach to it. It was like this, it was like, hey, you are finally getting to you're getting to play Anakin, the chosen one, the one that can show the dark and show the light and you know, balance that out. He says he can do it at will, and maybe has the power to save Ahsoka's life, which is also very interesting because that's the power that he was trying to achieve when he pledged himself to the dark side.
That's good.
And it's so amazing how, like, we all saw in the show that she's falling, she doesn't die, but like to put that together, that like Hayden's intervention at that moment is saving someone from death. You know, it's like the thing that Palpatine said, I can get you to that point. It's like, oh my gosh.
But
so
I think the difference is like Anakin wasn't obsessed with the idea of saving Ahsoka for a long time. It was something that just happened to her, and he happened to be there to help her. It was like an instinctual thing, post-mortem, of course. Whereas like his whole thing about Padme was just like this obsession, you know, with these nightmares and wanting to prevent his visions from happening because his mom died. So definitely different, but I like the parallel for sure.
Yeah, it seems to me like at one point he was overthinking something, and somebody like being like, stop overthinking it, do other stuff, and when the moment comes up, your natural talent will just be like all you need. But you've been sitting like stewing on it for so long, it's like you just need to let things go and just approach it from the chosen one, the wield both sides of the Force, light and dark, that you are. I just thought that was like the most amazing thing. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about, I thought you would probably want to discuss the other universe, like the other galaxy. Yeah. It was kind of said that it was going to be a broader part of the storytelling from this point forward. And I wanted to see if your approach was what we had kind of discussed before. Is this an important part of the storytelling in Ahsoka season 2, or is it a broader part of the storytelling in all Star Wars, that now we've opened the door and we have a whole new playground that all shows, all movies, all content can play in?
Yeah, it's interesting that he said he found the opening or opportunity to do this because of the star map in Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
And I had always joked that it's because of the announcer in The Phantom Menace saying, I don't care what universe you're from. That's got to hurt. But yeah, I don't know do you think this pairs with what he said about him wanting to build his conflict to not mirror like the past ones? Because he said, expect this broader universe to be a factor in any future Oh, this is what the article said. Expect this broader universe to be a factor in any future season of Ahsoka or that feature film he's developing. And his quote is, I'm setting up what seems to be a larger conflict with the Imperial Remnant. That conflict can't just mirror what we've seen before. It has to take on a different shape. It can't just be the Empire versus what looks like the Rebellion or even the Republic. It has to be visually different. So to me, that says to me he's going to play with that other galaxy, and it's going to factor into how this war that he's telling that's building up to his movie that will be completed in his movie is going to be told. So I think that second galaxy was just tapped into, and I think there's going to be more to it. I don't know if that's with the Mortis stuff, if that's like a gateway to Mortis. I don't know, but it sounds like he's going to keep that at least in his pocket because there's clear concern here that he doesn't want fans feeling like they're getting another X-Wings over here, TIE fighters over here, mishmash, a lightsaber on this side, so I think he's very cognizant of the fact that he wants to do something unique here. And maybe that other galaxy, at least existing, gives him a variable to add into his stew.
It does. So seeing his movie as the culmination of, all of these shows, it does make me feel like there's maybe like an Endgame-esque element to it where throughout the journey, we've discovered more about that universe, and we've discovered that there are people there, and those people are different, and they understand things differently, and their ships look different. And that is not the Resistance. It's not the Rebels. It's not the New Republic. It's this other entity that represents the good guys, the light side or whatever. And then you have the Empire and Thrawn and everything like that, but they aren't the Empire. The Empire fell, but they're not the First Order because the First Order is not around yet. They're this other thing that he's developing into this thing that is the remnants. He calls them remnants of the Empire. So it's like, what could that look like? Well, they can all wear blue uniforms, you know what I mean? Or because they fight with Thrawn, or they could, they could have some type of the Sisters of Dathomir magic involved. You know what I mean? That could be part of that evil that's coming forth, and use those as like a sort of a stand-in for Palpatine, where it's like, yeah, we're fighting the ships, the troopers, the bad guys, but also there's this otherworldly force dark element to their battle that is a stand-in sort of for Palpatine and the dark side and Vader, right? And I think like what he's describing, now granted, you said it's also sort of the this was specifically Dave that said the he needs to refocus it and make it look different. Yeah. I think that's what makes sense to me. So I think at least for this aspect of, it's not just Ahsoka season 2, but also probably like the Mandalorian and the other stuff that they do in that world leading up to that movie, that might actually, you might be right on that, that this other galaxy could be a part of that space. That's a bad term. Space of which is part of Star Wars. Does that make sense? Yeah. But not so much with episode 10 or, other stories that they tell like in the High Republic or something. Like, how is that going to connect to these other things and stuff? I don't really know. I still kind of stand on, and he says it in the article too, like part of the reason that even exists is just because I knew I couldn't put Thrawn and Ezra in the unknown regions, even like
they would have been found by
anyone,
a passing ship, or
somebody would have come across. They would have hijacked those people. They would have used the ship to get out of the area that they're in. It's really not that big of a deal. We had to take them to a place where it was far, and I was like, yes, that's confirming what I said. This other galaxy is only there to solve a problem, and then once we went there and came back, which we're still there technically. That will be done. But further comments now, new information has come to light. He does sort of say that galaxy and the lore there and the painting of the picture of a different new light side good guy team, that galaxy might also be part of that story. I'm interested.
I still think it would have been really cool if, like, for whatever reason, that the Force did not live in that galaxy, and that adds like another variable to like, well, we can bring Ezra over there, but he'll be like Superman on Krypton.
Oh yeah.
You know, he like tries to do something and doesn't work. He's like, oh no, you know, but clearly it does work over there because he used it quite a bit, as did Ahsoka.
What I think could be interesting is they did a book where Luke Skywalker was sort of going around and talking to different people, and he had met other groups of people that understood what the Force was, but they called it something different and they utilized it differently. Mm-hmm. And I could see Filoni doing something like that where like, okay, yeah, they're still able to use the Force because the Force is what it is. But in that galaxy, they don't call it the Force. You know, they call it something different. Yeah, and they use the Ungo Bungo in a method that we maybe had never seen before, and that opens up like every time we get like episode 9 and JJ does new things with the Force. It's like that all could be pretty cool, you know?
Use the Pungo Bungo, Luke.
Yeah. But anything else that you wanted to say about the article? We kind of skipped over Sabine Wren. I felt like everything that was said in her section was just like, we kind of know this stuff.
I agree. That's not to, dismiss anything that Natasha Liu Bordizzo said, but yeah,
it was great. We'd heard it before.
Yeah, most of the other stuff felt like, we had knew it. So yeah, I think we're good there. And I look forward to what's ahead. I'm sure there's gonna be plenty more interviews and more clips and quotes and stuff now that these promotions are in line, and it appears they're now, with the strikes being over, steering towards pre-production on these movies. So I think 2024 things are going to start heating up quite a bit.
Yep. All right. Well, looking forward to what's next. It is this draft. We're still calling it a discussion, so expect to see the discussion logo, but we're getting ready to do the next section. That's it for Resistance Report. Here we go.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right, so we have the Kessel Run, which is more of a collective thing that we do, but we have done drafts in the past. Years and years and years ago, we did one for a March Madness pool back in 2018, I think. But
crazy.
Not too long ago, we did another draft where we did the best moments in Rebels. And now we're doing another draft, but it's not going to be as competitive, so to speak, because it's all about being thankful for Star Wars. So what we're going to do here is, James, do you have a coin handy? So we can flip a coin and see who goes first, at least.
Yes, I could do something. Okay. Got one.
All right. So what we're going to do here is give our 10 picks for what we're thankful for most about Star Wars. And we'll take turns, and we may snipe someone's pick here and there, but it's all the theme of this draft is more of a celebration of being thankful for this franchise and what it has provided us with as fans, and of course as podcasters, and all down the line. So, James, what are we doing? Should I call it in the air as you flip it, or what?
How about I call it in the air, because I know when it's in the air, and there might be like a lag or technological.
All right.
Ready?
Well, let me see the coin first.
It's not a coin. It's just something with two sides. It's a
God.
PSP battery. You got your matte black side, and you got your information side.
All right.
Head side being the like top, and then the details.
Tails is the white. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go like this. I'm gonna say heads. I'm looking at you, not looking at the thing. It's tails.
Oh, all right. All right. We would have had some controversy if that landed. All right. So let's get into this draft. Let's do it up, and we're going to do it with my first pick. So things I'm thankful for Star Wars. So just to be clear, we can't say like George Lucas, because George Lucas preceded Star Wars. He made Star Wars. We can't say Harrison Ford, because Harrison Ford was in movies before Star Wars. Our focus should be on things that Star Wars gave us organically, in a sense. And there's no science to this. We could probably bend some rules here, but some answers may be on the surface. Some answers may be a little nuanced and deep.
I was going to say, let's just, because some of mine might, I don't know.
But
I'm nervous about this. Is one of the ones that I'm nervous about. I'm like, I'm not sure entirely what the page is here, but we're going to go with it.
I'm going to say my first pick is revolutionizing visual effects. That's my first pick. I mean, right off the heels of, last year's Light and Magic, just truly understanding how George Lucas and ILM for Star Wars changed the entire game. And when people saw that movie in 1977, their minds were blown for good reason, because they had never seen anything like it, even though there had been science fiction before, there's been action before. The way they executed the effects for the first Star Wars and what that led to thereafter, all through today, is all thanks to Star Wars. So my first pick is the visual effects revolution that was dawned by the production of Star Wars.
Man, I'm so nervous about this draft that we even talked about it beforehand. I'm like, are we on the same page? But yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that we've definitely discussed over the years is how fortunate it is that Star Wars started like that, and how unfortunate it is that in later years, we haven't gotten as much of it when it comes to specifically the movies. Where we are seeing it is in, say, like Mandalorian, and it's like, oh wow, that's like new technology, and it's really cool to see Hollywood adapt to what the Mandalorian is doing, because you're seeing it everywhere now. In commercials and just like stuff that I do, even like at work, I'm like, okay, yeah, what we need to do is we need to figure out how the camera interacts with this screen that's here, and not just like edit it out or, green screen replace or whatever. That type of thing was something that as a videographer myself, like years ago, would like conceptualize I think of that and be like, that's where it's going to be in the future. And it took Star Wars to get us there. Out of all the, I mean, I'm not the only one thinking that. It was so many other filmmakers, and they just said like, yeah, the technology doesn't exist, but it was Star Wars that got us to that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if I'm on the same page with you here, it's like, I'm glad that Star Wars and the people who are making Star Wars are still trying to push that envelope, and the fact that it always has pushed the envelope is good for us. In
order for him to tell that story of Star Wars, he needed to do something that hadn't been done before with special effects, and they had to start from scratch and build things they had never done before. And that led to a lot of other movies being made with very cool special effects. So we definitely have Star Wars to thank for the revolution and just next level of special/visual effects. So that's my first pick. Definitely probably a little bit more of the deeper nuanced variety, but I got some pretty straightforward ones also on my list, so worry not. But James, what's your first pick?
All right. Well, I will go with let's go with something kind of similar. Behind the scenes.
Like documenting behind the scenes?
Anytime we just did the news story. I love it when we get, this is how the structure of Lucasfilm works. I love it when the people who are creating Star Wars tell us how it works. That could be in the form of a documentary like ILM or Light and Magic, I mean. It could be in the form of interviews. It could be in the form of books that are referencing all the history and all that. I'm like, it's one of those things. I know that movies do that. But not all movies get the opportunity to do that. They're not doing this stuff for Marvel. There is some behind the scenes stuff, but like when you look at the books and when you look at like these almost feature films of like the director and the Jedi, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't feel like that's coming out of Thor Ragnarok, It's just like there's something different about when people are working on the project They are excited to be there. They're excited to show the world how they did it. And they're fairly open with a lot of the stuff that they do. And we were just talking about the volume and the special effects. And it's like that, just them talking about it more and more, and us like getting the mystery of like, oh, it's this thing called the volume. Or like, what is that? And then they eventually show us, and we got the Disney galleries and stuff. It's like, and then just to be able to hear Filoni and Hayden Christensen sit down and say like, this is our approach to the characters and stuff. I think that's something that it needs to be done to some degree, but I think that Star Wars does a good job of understanding the fan base and how it's these things that also carry them into a long-term fandom.
I completely agree. I mean, I love behind the scenes stuff. I eat it up as soon as that stuff comes
Lacey
out.
too.
I watch it all. Yeah, definitely. I mean, just think about it. They made a 6-hour series just on visual effects last year. Empire of Dreams, The Phantom Menace, making them for The Phantom Menace is incredible. The one they did for episode 9 and episode 8.
Is that Skywalker Legacy?
Yes.
Is that what that was called?
For episode 9, I believe that's what it was, Skywalker Legacy, which that was very good too. Empire of Dreams, I think I mentioned, there's a ton. And it's all great. And it's also preserving history, like the way we say about, the J.W. Rinsler books, or like what, Clayton Sandell's working on now for Return of the Jedi. It's all good stuff, because as further and further time goes, and as generations, pass on, and, a lot of that information could get lost in that big old game of telephone. And the fact that we have these things to preserve that history and the facts is very important. And very special, and Star Wars definitely did that bigger and better than anyone. So that's a really good pick. I'm going more straightforward on my second pick, lightsabers. Lightsabers are just really cool. And if I try to picture Star Wars without lightsabers, and they say they were just using swords or not anything at all of that nature, I don't even know that it lasts the way it did. I think lightsabers really like blew people away, because it's like they'd seen fencing and sword fights and all these swashbuckling movies before, but this laser sword thing, like, I think it's just this very special thing, and it's just a lot of fun. Like, it's things that like adults still love to see, kids love them. It's you see those group photos at celebrations or at Galaxy's Edge, and what are people holding up? Lightsabers. It's a unifying thing. It's very cool because they don't exist in real life, but we want them to so badly, as dangerous as they might be. But just lightsabers, man. I am very thankful for Star Wars to have lightsabers, because there's a lot of fun. They're very cool, and they make the movies that much better.
I think there's quite a number of things, and there might be other things on your list too, but like that have pushed the entire franchise just because of that one thing existing, and I think lightsabers is probably like top 10 of things that, like, when you say like name something that's Star Wars related, or name something, you know what I mean? And it's just like, you say lightsaber and it's like this weapon that exists, and that everybody knows what it is, but it only is in Star Wars. And anytime it's ever showed up in anything else, it's just a copy of Star Wars. Like, we're pretty confident that only is there because of Star Wars. Now, George didn't invent the light sword, but for whatever he did, he Chick-fil-A'd it, like we didn't invent the chicken.
Were there lightsabers?
We just invented the chicken sandwich
before Star Wars?
No, well, I'm sure like laser swords, like in comics or something along these lines of like some type of weaponry that's sort of like an imaginary blade or some type of light blade or something. I don't think he got that, like Flash Gordon stuff. I can't really say for certain. I'm not like,
I just figured he took like Kurosawa samurai stuff, and he's like, how do I make that spacey and like sci-fi? And he's like, let's make it a laser instead of a blade.
but what I'm saying is like, I like, think of how many other thing like blasters. Like he also did the same thing with guns. Like he took the idea of a gun and he made it spacey, but that doesn't carry over. What I'm saying about lightsabers, I think that there's something very inherently special about the fact that it succeeded so well, that it has like set the precedent of like laser swords. That's only Star Wars, but like laser blaster, laser gun, you can see that anywhere. You can see that in so many other properties, and you're not like, well, they're just stealing that from Star Wars.
You put out your laser sword, and people are gonna be like, that's such a ripoff. Yeah,
you don't even think about it with other weapons or ships or other things like that. For the most part, like just space travel in general, or like a TIE fighter, it like floats above the ground, it like a Harrier jet or something, it like takes off. Like we see that in science fiction, but like the lightsaber is like you pull it out and it's like immediately like, oh, that's a lightsaber. I don't care what they're calling it in this series, that's what that is. It comes from Star Wars, It's set the bar.
Yeah, I agree, and it's just they're just so cool. To give the like very vapid answer, it's just they're a lot of fun and they're very cool and they sound awesome, and the colors, the hilts, everything. All right, James, what's your second pick?
So a couple of these are things that I think like on the surface, when I say them, you might go like, yeah, but it's one of those things where like, I think we talk about this stuff pretty often, and we talk so much about Star Wars that it gets to a point where we talk about the negative things often too. But when you get down to the root of it, we need to be thankful and glad that we have things like expanded lore. I'm using that as mine. I have always really liked that it was able to move beyond. So like you take something like Harry Potter. Harry Potter does have expanded lore, but really when it comes down to it, it's like these books or these things, and then like that's it. But Star Wars has always really embraced that. It's like, oh, we got all these side stories, all these other characters. It goes deeper. We got these comics, we got these things. Even when it comes down to like videos that they're putting out on YouTube, and YouTube Kids and things like that. We have Young Jedi Adventures on Disney Plus, and it's like some of this stuff is things that we're like, oh, we may or may not take that in, or we don't like how they're handling X or Y. But what I'm getting at the core is we need to remember that like that stuff doesn't have to exist. Like they could just be like, those are the movies, and that is what it is. Like, for instance, we don't really get this with Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones has always been a franchise that's been based on, we have these movies and they're tent poles, and then every once in a while they might do something fun or maybe a side thing, but there is no like Indiana Jones expanded universe, It's like,
right.
Even when it comes to that stuff, but the new stuff specifically, it's just really cool that they are willing to dive deeper into that stuff.
So what would you say, like supplemental content?
Oh, I say expanded lore. That's
lore.
What I wrote down. I say, yeah, you take the lore of the movies, but then I'm really glad that they are willing to put out this comic series that has almost nothing to do with it. Just fits into that universe, and they do. They do connect it, but it's really about just the fact that they're willing to tell more stories and not and do it well,
Yeah, I agree. They do it well, and I like the fact that there are a lot of different mediums in which you can take in these stories, and also fill in gaps in ways that a lot of people would say, like, like the Clone Wars is a great example for helping people appreciate the prequels more, or that sort of thing. And you're right. You don't see that a lot with other, with all IPs, and Star Wars certainly does a great job of that. And you could argue that they're one of the pioneers of really stretching out their IP a bit.
It's almost like George was like, he made the prequels and people didn't understand it. And he's like, well, I'm going to find the people that did understand it, and we're just going to keep making more stuff until you understand it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. No, that's a good pick. I like that. All right. So my next one, my third pick, I'm going with humanizing science fiction. I was trying to cheat and Google when the Guardians of the Galaxy were like invented, but it's like I imagine it was after Star Wars, right? They weren't like a thing in the 1960s, right?
I was very surprised when my father-in-law told me that he had known about the Guardians of the Galaxy. He was reading their comics when he was younger. Now, granted, I don't know if that predates 1977, but
so I see a comic. It says 1969, the Guardians of the Galaxy, but I don't think it doesn't appear to be like the current iteration that we're used to seeing. And I guess what I'm getting to is like there was Star Trek before Star Wars, sure, but even Star Trek was based on the science of what they were doing. And it wasn't so much about the relationships between the characters. Now, I think Star Trek took a page out of Star Wars' book, and in the Star Trek movies, they started doing that a bit more. But you can't compare it to Star Wars when it comes to the relationships, and that was first for George, and the science fiction and space stuff was the backdrop and the environment. And since Star Wars came out with the humor, which you never saw in science fiction really before Star Wars, Star Wars is funny, very funny, and all that comes with that, the sass, the very earthy-like characters dropped into the middle of this wild, weird science fiction environment. You then see a lot of like things that were inspired by that, including stuff like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Like you could blueprint that whole crew, and even Star Wars itself, borrowing from itself with like Rebels and like fitting certain archetypes. And
I think you're a little bit giving Guardians too much credit. Like Guardians was, even if it predated, it was nowhere near as popular or successful. Even when they said they were making the movie, people were like, what is that?
I did too, and I love it.
Everybody did pretty much.
So, and there's other examples of sci-fi space type stuff that now understands it's okay to not be so 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is very dry, very just dystopian and like not hopeful. And Star Wars turned that on its head. And I think it opened the door to make science fiction more accessible to different types of storytelling. So I'm going with the humanizing of science fiction.
Yep. I definitely like that. And I like when your picks are more like mine and they're a little bit wild.
I'm like, lightsabers! And I'm like, the humanizing of science fiction.
Yeah. Well, I have an easy one, and I was like really trying not to say it in my last one. It's so
this
connected.
Is your third pick. This is your third pick. Yeah.
My third pick is continuity.
Oh.
I have said this like from the very beginning. I love that they have the comic books and stuff, but before Disney bought Lucasfilm and I tried getting into Star Wars, yes, there was a lot of content. So yes, part of it was I felt like there was too much. But one really big aspect of it was I just couldn't grasp how like this story had things that were accurate but also things that weren't accurate. And it's like, okay, so then that puts it into this like other tier and subcategory part A, like all of it was so confusing. And while I understand the idea that like I could be arguing right now, it's like, oh, it's so great that none of that stuff matters. If you want to tell a story about Boba Fett being like this, tell the story about Boba Fett being like that, that's it. But to me, personally, I do love that it all works. I find that stuff immensely attractive, after the fact, to go through and watch the YouTube videos, go through and break down the Easter eggs and the continuity and the references. And when a character shows up, I'm not just like, okay, for instance, Thrawn shows up and it's sort of Thrawn, but they've sort of changed Thrawn a little bit, here and there, whatever. I don't want to have to feel that way every single time he's in anything,
Yeah.
He's in Rebels. Now that he's in live action, he's got a completely different background story, origin story or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to even mess with that stuff. I'm so glad that when he shows up in Ahsoka, I go, I know Thrawn.
That's him.
I know everything about him. I've read the books. I've watched the show. I love that Lucasfilm still to this day, and they may break away from it sometime soon, and they've been doing it a long time, but at some point they may break away from it. But I'm glad that today they still hold on to the continuity, and it makes sense for people that pick up something. They can understand where and how it takes place.
I actually think, like, in thinking about this and hearing you talk about it, I actually think this probably could have been higher on the lists, because I think that continuity and what I affiliate with continuity is the preservation of the suspension of disbelief, like making your stories real. And I think that's one of the things Lucasfilm does best, is that is Luke Skywalker. Like, that is, he did that 10 years ago in that other story, and they're talking about it right now. And the overlaps and a lot of cool stuff they do and how they keep it connected is very good. Now, Marvel did a great job with it with the Infinity Saga. We're not here to say Star Wars, necessarily did it best, but they did it so well, and it's been around for so long that we're thankful for that. So,
and other franchises do this, but again, let's just set Marvel aside for just one quick second. Star Wars does it better than all of them. Mm-hmm. Marvel, maybe, maybe it's the other one, but let's really talk about it. The two big players right now are Marvel and Star Wars that are putting out a lot of material and keeping it all in line. And it's like, okay, whether you like Marvel or not, I like Star Wars, and they are top tier. They're just doing it better than anybody else,
Yeah. And all the way down to, and this is maybe controversial for some, but, having Luke look like Mark Hamill in an era where he should, as opposed to just either recasting or what have you, like, they go through lengths to make Star Wars as quote unquote real as possible, so that when we turn on a Star Wars show or movie, we are visiting this galaxy far, far away. We're not just watching some work of fiction. Like, this is a story being told to us that happened a long time ago, and they go at it and make that stuff with that passion and with that desire to preserve that suspension of disbelief. And they do a remarkable job at it, all the way down to even at the theme park level at this point too. Mm-hmm. It's just, you can criticize a lot about Lucasfilm, especially over the last 10 years. But one thing that I will wave the flag and champion that they are so good at is continuity, and their devotion to it is unmatched, in my opinion. I think it is unbelievable how good they do with their story continuity. So that's a really good pick.
And that locks in my next one too. And then my last one will be like a little bit more of a wild card, but
yeah, my next one, very surface level, but it's my favorite movie of all time. So The Empire Strikes Back. I'm very thankful for Star Wars for The Empire Strikes Back. I consider it to be the best movie of all time. I think people who don't might say it's in the conversation for the best sequel of all time. I think the importance of The Empire Strikes Back and why I'm thankful for it is its success in being one of the most successful independent films of all time, because George had the rights to it and he funded it, allowed Star Wars to continue. And when you think of a franchise that has a great sequel, it often, like you were saying about lightsabers, like that can trigger the whole bevy of stories after it because of how cool that is. The Empire Strikes Back does that because they're like, well, we made one great sequel. Let's chase that and do it again. And then you get Return of the Jedi. Whereas some franchises like Terminator 2, unbelievable movie. I would say better than the first Terminator. They kept trying to chase that. They kept trying to chase that white whale and say, like, let's make another great Terminator sequel, and they haven't been able to do it since, in my opinion. Whereas Star Wars, we've gotten so much great stuff because George Lucas proved that you can make a follow-up to that first classic movie and make it great, if not better. And also
Again, set the bar.
Yeah, and just from a personal standpoint, my favorite movie of all time. So it's just I got to be thankful for Star Wars, because without Star Wars, obviously, Empire Strikes Back doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think one thing that we forget about too is like we see movies that are sequels very often these days, and at the time that Empire Strikes Back came out, I don't think it was as common to do a sequel like that. A movie that sort of like really picks up on where the last one left off and takes the characters on new journeys. I think what like at the time in the 70s and very early 80s, obviously, what they were looking to do when you were to say something like, oh, so you guys are doing Star Wars 2.
Yeah, right.
You know, Star Wars 2 would be the same character again, doing the same thing again, maybe with like different villains or something. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just like, no, that's not what people want to see in a story. They want to see the characters go here and then be taken on a new journey where they have to do X or Y. And I think that Empire Strikes Back, being as good as it is and being released when it was, has moved Hollywood into a world where we tell long form storytelling now. And even so, it's gotten to the point where it's trailed into now where people are wanting to watch more television, because they don't just want to see, when I say television, I mean this type of television. We've gotten less of Power Rangers where every day they fight a different monster, and we've gotten into television shows that are like, no, I want to see the characters fight a monster and then have to fight the same monster with a different thing, and then that monster is a good guy now, and then, you know what I mean, like they want to see that story keep going. And I really do think that The Empire Strikes Back doesn't get enough credit, because we talk often about how it's one of the greatest movies of all time, but we stop there for the most part. And we need to go back and rethink why that movie did what it did. And just another example of that quickly is the plot twist. The big thing at the end is like the gold standard for like plot twists.
100%, dude.
And it's like that movie creating that for Hollywood has been like, everybody in Hollywood is chasing that. They describe it as, you know, the Luke, I'm your father moment, which I know isn't the line, but that's how people talk about it. Yeah. And there's very few movies. There's movies with great plot twists. Probably number 2 is probably The Sixth Sense. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking about
that's got to be the other movie that people are like, that's the gold standard plot twist movie.
So I'll say The Sixth Sense has a good twist, but it makes the movie unwatchable after you know it. I had no interest in watching that movie after that. Whereas we just did The Prestige on my other podcast, just like the movies, and I was saying about how Christopher Nolan gave us a movie with an unbelievable twist, but it's very rewatchable after. That's The Empire Strikes Back. Like. And you're right. Gold standard.
You can't do Sixth Sense 2.
No.
Like, even if you did, it would be different. It would be like about the kid or something. I don't know. It just wouldn't be like, you can't take that lore of Bruce Willis's character and expand it. But when you watch Star Wars, you're like, whoa, I need to know more. How did his father turn into that character? Now what's going to happen now that Luke has that information? It's just so good. And I mean, we're preaching to the choir. We're all Star Wars fans. We know it, but we need to take a second to recognize that, hey, The Empire Strikes Back happened in our franchise. Yeah. We're Star Wars fans. It happened in our franchise. It didn't happen over there.
That's our awesome sequel.
In Jaws, it wasn't Jaws 2 that took Jaws to a new level and set the bar for movies from now on.
The Jaws sequels, man. All right, so that's my 4th pick. I got one more to go, but we need your 4th pick.
My 4th pick, again, is going to roll off of the last couple picks that I've had, and it is Voice. I'm so thankful that Star Wars has a very specific voice, and it's often pushed on by fans, but I think that Lucasfilm does a very good job at making sure that Star Wars content feels like Star Wars. And they could at any degree say, like, I think like a good example of that is like, is the Marvel stuff. Sometimes, you know, you get like Thor in this movie and then you get Thor in this other movie. And it's like, you know, the point of that movie is it was supposed to be fun and bright and different. And, you know, the point of this movie was supposed to be dark and blah, 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 blah. To me, I feel like even though we have our Andor and our Mandalorian, I think that both of those shows feel like Star Wars more than Marvel has ever had like a distinct tone and voice. And I think that is, and even if you did want to argue, like I said before, Marvel's doing continuity fine. Marvel's also doing tone pretty well too. It's not like I'm not trying to say how bad it is over there, but I'm trying to say, I just mentioned Jaws. It's like movies and sequels could go in completely different tones and direction. And Star Wars says, that's not us. We're not going to do a horror Star Wars movie. You know, if we want to add horror elements to it, it first has to be Star Wars. It has to have this tone, this voice, and then we can play in that world of making these guys kind of like zombie troopers. But we didn't get zombie, like zombie Star Wars, you know, like it was like that's
Star Wars has its Star Wars has, it seems to have its like limits, or at least things that it has to abide by.
Yes, there's walls to the universe that if you want to take this and put it into our gardened off area, then that's fine. But we're never going to create content that's over here for a quick buck.
We don't have
that's topical or something.
A supreme Force user who can like smush a planet with the Force like a marble or something, you know. There's
or even here's a great example that's still in Star Wars. When they weren't doing this, we got the holiday special.
Yeah,
it's like we'll just take Star Wars, or we'll take a variety show and we'll just skin it with Star Wars and make the quick buck. And it's like, no, that none of that feels like Star Wars.
How they got Harrison Ford to do that?
You need a voice. I know, yeah. They got all three of them to do it. I know. It's wild. But I mean, that's how it went. And at the time, I still think those three actors specifically, I mean, all of them, Anthony Daniels, everybody, but like, I just don't think they even really fully grasped what Star Wars was yet. And they're still in that world where they're willing to do the variety show because Star Wars 2 is right around the corner. And they don't understand what a great franchise and story and so many other stories this can be, because Empire Strikes Back hadn't happened yet, you know?
Imagine the holiday special derailed the franchise and just like
that's
Fox is like, we're not making your sequel.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So voice, definitely a cousin of what you were saying with continuity, but I like what you're saying there. So it has its own distinct voice. I like that. Okay. All right. I have, and in terms of that, you're right, because also aside from it knowing its limits, and that's also a part of that whole element of making it like real, because if it's real, then there are limits to it because it exists. But as far as its voice, it's distinct in that, like, you see something and you could almost be like, yeah, I think that's Star Wars. You know, I can feel that's like Star Wars. But so yeah, it's a good pick. My last one here, probably gushing for points, but I'm gonna say it. Fandom.
So you took the two. I took two. No, but you narrowed down, so I only have the one left, so I got to go with that one then.
Oh, okay.
You chose for me, essentially, is what you did.
All right. Well, I mean, we could probably both speak to this anyway. You know, I don't pay attention to, the social media stuff that can get a bit nasty among some people. I'm talking about the real fandom of Star Wars. When you go outside of your house and you meet somebody who likes Star Wars and you nerd out with them for a few minutes and they go on their way, you go on your way. And, just how it gets handed down from generation to generation. It's very familial, whether it's meeting people like in our podcast community, whether that's fellow podcasts, or people who listen to our podcast, and we've developed our own little corner of the fan galaxy, so to speak, with TRB. Hi, everybody. Love
Hello.
you. And just like the three of us, you, me, and Lacey, and how we've gotten on over the years. And I really do feel like Star Wars fandom, when you think about it, there's no Marvel celebration. There's no DC celebration. There's a Star Wars celebration because of the fans and how much it means to us. I don't like to take it too seriously, but at the same time, it is our sort of new mythology, and it teaches a lot of great lessons. And you walk through an event, and there's probably a lot of people who haven't been to a celebration, but if you go to any convention, you'll see Star Wars fans, and they're always approachable, and they'll always want to nerd out with you and talk to you. And there is that cool element of being out somewhere, which probably happens with a band T-shirt too. But you see someone wearing a Star Wars T-shirt, and you're like, hey, you give them a nod or a
do you remember
wave.
when I tried to cultivate that? I never was able to get you guys on board or anybody else, but I came up with, hey, Star Wars. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Hey, I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you on the podcast right now, I think that's a good idea, because there is that thing where if I see someone with a Star Wars short, I know I'm going to get along with that person. I know that I'm going to be able to give them that
Hopefully.
that air knuckles or whatever. No, I think so. The air knuckles that sports teams have, where you're you could say go blue, and immediately there's that camaraderie of hey, we both like this same thing. And it works with band shirts too. You can just tell by a person because they're wearing a certain band shirt. And my thing was, I wanted a branding that was called Hey Star Wars. And it was just the thing that when you walked by a person and you saw them and you wanted to connect, we could say something like, may the force be with you or whatever. But I just wanted something that was hey, hey, I see you. We're aware of each other, kind of thing.
Now you had this on your list also as
I did. I wrote it.
Choice.
I wrote it as community, which
I wrote fandom/community. Yeah.
So my thing here is everything that you just talked about as far as all that, but also where I sort of came from is one thing that I absolutely do enjoy is the fact that there are podcasts, the fact that there are YouTube videos, the fact that there are blogs like our old Star Wars Newsnet, you know what I mean? That people that are covering this stuff regularly, daily, and it's all because they're fans. It's not something where there's money in it, so people are just doing it to whatever. It's usually people who love Star Wars and they love talking about Star Wars, so they create the content which just absolutely makes everything about Star Wars better, because you get the different perspective and you can have the conversation, you can talk to other fans, all that stuff. It comes down to the content that the community is creating, and the vibe that they're putting off is what makes Star Wars great.
I agree.
And in a lot of cases, like I said, it accelerates the conversation, and oftentimes I never thought about it like that, because Lucasfilm isn't going to tell us everything. Hayden has great quotes sometimes, but we need to listen to the other voices in the community to be like Daisy, I never thought about it like that before.
Yeah. And the whole element of with kids, my kids aren't there yet, but if they do want to get into Star Wars, it'll be cool being able to see them experience it through their eyes and watch them, take it in and what they think about it, who their favorites are. And it's definitely one of those things that it's been around for so long for a reason. Movie franchises and IPs come and go and they have their moments, but Star Wars has stood the test of time and has been here and still here. So it's, and the fans are a massive part of that, so.
Yeah. And like I said, when it comes down to these videos and these podcasts and stuff like that, it like Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, great movies, undeniably. You know what I mean? So many people look at them, or Terminator, you were mentioning Terminator 2, right? And they're still making those movies. There is not regularly every week just a slew of videos about the lore revolving around those stories.
Right.
It's like Star Trek has that, Marvel has that, but Marvel probably even more so, not even about the movies, more so about like the comics and regular, like that stuff. The content that comes out of Star Wars is so great from the fan community that I think that we should be thankful that it's very easy to watch an episode of Ahsoka and then be able to go and find just, so much supplemental content after that.
Yeah.
Coming from the fan community.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. So that rounds out my picks. You have one pick to go, and then we'll run through the lists again and get out of here so everybody can get on with their Thanksgiving.
This was the first thing I wrote, and I was kind of like, I don't know if this is the direction we're going or not. And so once I figured out my own voice and tone for this segment, I went back and looked at that first one. I was like, I probably won't even mention it, but now I got to.
Oh boy.
It's Disney Plus.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Hit me with it. Why Disney Plus?
Well, I think the thing for me, more than you and Lacey specifically, is you guys seem to be physical media, and I am all about digital media. I love that Disney decided to launch this app and headline it, and literally headline it, Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic, and Pixar, And Star Wars is one of those things that whenever you open up this app, and this may change, there's talks of like merging with Hulu and so that might not be forever. My thing is like, I love that when I open up my Disney app, it has Star Wars right up there at the top. And it's like, this is an amazing franchise. This is a corner of our organization. And when I click on that button, it takes me to all of the movies, all of the TV shows, all of these behind the scenes documentaries and everything. And they've cataloged it in a way that is available on my phone, on my iPad, on my television, on my browser. Like at any moment I can just click plus and type in that URL that goes Disney Plus /Star Wars. And it's like, boom, the whole world is right here. And the only criticism I have with Disney Plus is that I wish they would include the stuff that's on YouTube. And I get that there's a point for it being on YouTube, but like, I do wish I could go through and just as long as I wanted to click a little bit further, I could get Galaxy of Adventures and stuff like that. I think that if you have this app that is supposed to be your digital mecca for all things under this brand, I think it's a good idea to, next time you raise your prices, just take some of that stuff and say, you can watch the stuff on YouTube, but obviously you get the stuff on YouTube and more. It's not just like the other stuff. You get all of it in one place. So that's my only criticism with Disney Plus. But for me, the way that it stands right now, I love digitally that there is this one place to go for all things Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that Star Wars is responsible for it, but they did kick off Disney Plus with The Mandalorian. So I think that makes it a very valid pick because The Mandalorian became successful immediately. And then that gave them the confidence to do more. And that gave us more Star Wars TV. And
I was going to say, I actually didn't even think of that. The fact that like, because Disney Plus exists, Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Andor, those exist now too,
So yeah, I mean, I think that's, I never would have picked it. And I don't even know if I ever would have thought of like picking Disney Plus as like, thank you Star Wars for Disney Plus. But when you think about it in that sense, because they really did kick everything off with The Mandalorian, I think it's valid. And it has really opened up things a bit because all the stuff we were just talking about in Resistance Report 6 hours ago or whatever it was,
Long episode
about how
back to back.
expanding these galaxies and all that stuff. That all happened on Disney Plus, Star Wars. So there is something to that. So I think that is a valid choice. But that wraps up the list, man. We got through the draft. Let's go through what we ended up picking. So round one, I picked the sound/visual effects revolution. Round one, you picked behind the scenes featurettes and documentaries. And again, this is what we are thankful for Star Wars. Round two, I picked lightsabers, and round two, you picked expanded lore. Round three, I went with humanizing science fiction. Round three, you went with story continuity. Round four, I went with The Empire Strikes Back. Round four, you went with Star Wars having its distinct voice. And round five, I went with fandom community. And you went with Disney Plus. And those are our picks. That's what we are thankful for Star Wars in this draft. Probably revisit this in the future, maybe even next Thanksgiving. Get Lacey in the mix and see what we can do there. But it was a good time. Good time drafting. You have fun?
Yeah. It's funny. You read that again, and I'm like, yeah, man, my pick does seem really random at the end there, Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But hey, man, there's something about it for me. Like, Apple's doing, I just got into soccer. Everybody knows this that listens to the podcast, but like Apple did this thing called MLS Season Pass, and it's so good to have everything in one spot, man. I'm telling you, versus like all these different games that are airing on all sorts of different stations and stuff. It's like, just give me all of it in one place where I can click that button and it's right there. And so, like, I'm so glad that that Star Wars, like I said, it wasn't Star Wars that did it, but I'm glad that Star Wars is the top tier of the headliner when it comes to Disney Plus.
Especially the launch of it, no doubt. All right, good stuff. Let us know what you think about our draft. I want to hear what maybe some things you might have picked if you had the opportunity to draft, and who knows, maybe in the future we'll introduce some fan picks if you like the draft. So first of all, let us know if you enjoy the draft format. It's certainly nothing we necessarily invented, but we did do one quite many years ago, almost 6 years ago now. I think we need to get into those ones where we really are going to steal each other's answers. And I realized that after the fact, even though there's two of us, we shouldn't be going back and forth. We should still do Snake because it's way more fair. I think when Lacey's back, it will probably be the next time we do a draft anyway. We'll probably do a 3-person Snake, and it'll be easier to justify it that way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree. Okay. That's it. So we want to thank everybody for listening, watching, being a part of TRB. We hope you enjoyed this big fat episode because we are not putting out an episode 3 Monday.
Yeah.
Basically, what we did was we took the Monday episode and mixed it with the Thursday episode. So that's what this is here. You can cut it in part 1 and 2. If you want to split us up on 2 VHS tapes, that's fine with me. But we have no episode coming Monday. We'll be back next Thursday for TRB Live. So we hope you enjoyed this one. All the news we talked about and our draft. So thank you to everybody for listening and watching and being a part of TRB. Make sure you are subscribed to the show. And if you're sitting around a Thanksgiving table today and you know someone who likes Star Wars, or Star Wars comes up, hey, did you hear about this movie? Did you hear about this? Just say like, hey, have you checked out this podcast, The Resistance Broadcast? Check them out. They're the best Star Wars podcast in the galaxy. That's you saying that. That's not me saying that. That's you saying that. So let them know and spread the word. We appreciate it, but ultimately we hope everyone just has a great holiday and great Thanksgiving. If you do love what we do here at TRB, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. Tiers start at just $5. We have a lot of great exclusive content on there, including bonus episodes, commentaries. We have a Discord server. We have a lot of stuff on there. So head to patreon.com/Resistance Broadcast. And if you're able to, and you can support us, thank you very much. We want to do a special shout out to our generals and spice runners: Carmelo, John RISI, Jetta Rosewater, Frank Grande, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny Mike Ramori, Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Sneaky Zebra, Colin Cormier, Jolt and Jedi DiMaggio, Diana and Dave Hornack, and the spice runners: David Probus, Neil SHAH, Kendall Gelner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and the Fort Worthian, and all of our patrons and all of our supporters, all of our listeners, all of our friends. Thank you all so much. Be sure to hit up Lacey on social media at Lacey Gilleran And for me, it's at Johnny Hoey, and my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We just put out our episode on Christopher Nolan's The Prestige. So check that out. Watch the movie first, then check it out. It's in my top 10 movies of all time. James, how about you?
I also really like The Prestige. Is that what you mean?
Oh, all right. Excellent. Excellent.
No, that movie is quite incredible.
Yeah.
And then what was the other movie that came out like right at the same time? The
Illusionist.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you guys want to talk to me about The Prestige or The Illusionist or Star Wars, hit me up on social media at MyArtTrunks.
All right. That will do it for us here. So again, no episode Monday because we sort of gave you 2 episodes in one here today. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody. If you're not in the U.S., you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, what have you, have a great weekend. We hope everyone's well out there. Be safe, be happy, and we'll see you next Thursday for TRB Live right here on the Resistance broadcast. See you around, kids.